We are indeed honored to have in our midst the illustrious Mr. Philip Wollen, OAM. His chief mission is to promote kindness towards all other living beings and enshrine it as a recognizable trait in Australian character and consciousness. A big man with a big heart, and most importantly, big on vision. We are proud to claim Mr. Philip Wollen as an illustrious Cottonian. The graduating class of 2012-2013 are extremely privileged to have as stalwart a personality as Mr. Philip Wollen to address them in his valedictory address. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Philip Wollen.
Dr. Zachariah, the Honourable Mrs. Gandhi, Mr. Yushino, honoured guests, fellow Cottonians, ladies and gentlemen. King Lear, late at night on the cliffs, asks the blind Earl of Gloucester, "How do you see the world?" And the blind man Gloucester replies, "I see it feelingly." And shouldn't we all? I've travelled over 20,000 kilometres to be here today with a message and really a challenge. Any Cottonian who one day wishes to win the Nobel Prize should listen very carefully to this challenge. It's an important one and one very close to my heart. Now, the Icelanders have a wonderful story in folklore about Skidbladnir, a mythical ship. And apart from its gigantic size, it had two qualities that made it unique. One, when it was becalmed out on the ocean, it could summon up a breeze from any direction to take it wherever it wanted to go. And two, it could be folded up so small and so light, you could carry it in your pocket. Imagine that. A ship that could take you wherever you wanted to go under any conditions, and so small it weighed nothing. That is a profound metaphor for an education. Like the ship, an education weighs nothing, and it can take you wherever you want to go. Bishop Cotton's was my magical ship, and it took me safely on many dangerous voyages. I should also mention that 12 members of my family have been to the boys' school and to the girls' school, and the first member of my family to enroll in this school was in the year 1892. That wasn't me. As young Shiva Grover said earlier, you can take the boy out of Cottons, but you cannot take Cottons out of the man. Now, they say that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton, and Cottons is known as the Eton of the East. So will the battle for values be won on the playing fields of Cottons? I sincerely hope so, because our character and our destinies are built on our values, and I got mine at Cottons. And it was here that I learned that a man is measured not by how much money he makes, but how much of it he's willing to give away, particularly to strangers. There is a Swahili proverb, "If you wish to travel fast, travel alone. If you wish to travel far, travel together." Your generation has no choice. You will have to travel far and fast. You see, the world has changed. 10 years ago, Twitter was a bird sound. www was a stuck keyboard. Cloud was in the sky. Skype was a typo. 3G was a parking space. Google was a baby's burp. And Al-Qaeda was my plumber. Now, the most beautiful word ever written in any country, in any language, at any time in human history came from India, from the Upanishads 5,000 years ago. Ahimsa, non-violence to any living being. Now, Aditya Sandhi will tell you that at law school, we are always taught about our legal duty of care. It's drummed into our heads. But nowhere in the world, nowhere in the world will you ever hear of a legal duty to care. Nowhere in the world, anywhere. Except in one place, in the Indian Constitution. It shall be the fundamental duty of every Indian citizen to show compassion for all living creatures. Every Indian should be so proud of those words in that Constitution. Believe me, India is the canary in the coal mine. If our Ahimsa dies in India, the human species is doomed. I'll give you evidence for that assertion. Rudyard Kipling wrote of young men dying at the end of World War I, and if they ask you why we died, tell them that our fathers lied. You see, the world is crying out today for only two things: leadership and the truth. Tonight, I'm simply going to tell you the truth. I have long admired Count Moltke, the Prussian general, a soldier who preferred to think rather than to speak, a man silent in 7 languages. You see, it takes courage to stand up and speak, but it also takes courage to sit down and listen. The wise Chinese have a term for it, zhengjiao. Listen to the friend who tells you the truth, even when it hurts. So let's just tell the truth fearlessly and forcefully. That is what the Sanskrit word satyagraha means, the truth force. So what made me, a Cottonian boy from Bangalore, leave the world of lobsters and Learjets in exchange for shelters and slaughterhouses? What made me decide to take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, own nothing but memories, kill nothing but time? You see, something happened to me. I had been to Dante's Inferno, but unlike Dante, I did not have Beatrice for my love, nor Virgil for my guide. The Greek poet Horace said, "Change only the name, and my story is also about you." You see, I heard the screams of my dying father as his body was ravaged by the cancers that killed him. And I realized I had heard those screams before. In the slaughterhouse, on the cattle ships to the Middle East, and the dying mother whale as a harpoon explodes in her brain as she calls out to her calf. Their cries were the cries of my father. And I discover that when we suffer as equals. And in their capacity to suffer, a dog is a pig, is a bear, is a boy. Now, they say that Americans go to war to learn about geography. Well, I have found a better way. I simply go where I'm needed. So this is where I work today. In China, 7,000 magnificent moon bears, their limbs torn off in traps, are imprisoned in steel coffins welded shut as a catheter drains bile into a bucket which the Chinese drink. The bears go insane. I wrote a book for Nelson Mandela on this very subject. In Korea, dogs are beaten to death in the marketplace because they believe that pain and suffering makes the meat tasty. In South Africa, 5,000 orphan lions are drugged and killed with guns, spears, or hunting dogs, and they call it sport. In Canada, 300,000 baby seal pups are clubbed and skinned alive on the ice. their tiny hearts still beating. In my own country, in Australia, our animals are sent to the Middle East where their eyes are stabbed out and their tendons are slashed. And we human beings treat the ocean as our private pantry and as a public toilet. The Pacific gyre now is so full of plastic, junk, and human feces, it has created a floating footprint bigger than India. Dolphins and whales are stabbed to death in the shallows of Japan and in Denmark. Entire bays are blood red, redder than that carpet. And animal factories spew chemicals into the ocean, creating hypoxic dead zones of 1 million square kilometers, killing all life in the oceans. And dairy calves all around the world are killed because they cannot be sold for veal by farmers smashing their heads or jumping on their rib cages and crushing their hearts, 200 million of them every year. And bouncy little chicks are ground up alive by mechanical mincers simply because they are male. And children starve around the world because their croplands now produce meat for foreigners. Trillions of fish are ground up into pellet to feed to livestock. Vegetarian cows are now the world's largest ocean predators. Cows eat more fish than sharks, whales, dolphins, seals, all of them put together. You see, my fellow Cottonians, the oceans are dying in our time. By 2048, all our fisheries will be dead, the lungs and the arteries of the earth, poisoned by the meat and livestock industry. In human history, only 100 million people have ever lived. 7 billion people live today. And yet we torture and kill 2 billion sentient living beings every week. 10,000 entire species are wiped out every year because of the actions of one species. If any other organism did this, a biologist would call it a virus. We are now facing the 6th mass extinction in cosmological history. It is a crime of unimaginable proportions. But we live in a world of media sound bites. It reminds me of Hannah Arendt's book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, where she coins the term, the banality of evil. This is how an evil journalist in the West twisted my words and attacked me. Mr. Wollen, I'm surprised a man of your standing would say that meat is murder, a little old lady with a budgerigar is offending God, livestock producers are unethical, there will be no peace until we stop killing animals, industry is unattractive, animals are like human children. Can't you see how offensive that is to our rural audience? Well, this was my diplomatic reply. Well, you're a liar, and you've twisted my innocent words. I did say a robin redbreast in a cage puts all of heaven in a rage, but that came from William Blake. And by the way, it was the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said, a sparrow does not fall from the sky without Allah knowing. And yes, I did say the commandment, thou shalt not kill, applies to the murder of any living being. It was inscribed on the human breast long before it was proclaimed from Mount Sinai. But actually, that was Leo Tolstoy. And yes, I admit I did say the roots of cruelty are not strong, just widespread. But the time will come when inhumanity, protected by custom, will succumb to humanity championed by thought. A man is ethical only when all life is sacred to him. But actually, that was Albert Schweitzer, winner of the Nobel Prize. And yes, I did say, as long as we kill animals, there will never be peace in the world. It is only one step to the concentration camps of Hitler and Stalin. There will be no justice as long as man will stand with a knife and destroy those who are weaker than him. But that was Isaac Singer, a Jew and a Nobel Prize winner. And yes, I admit I did have something to say about animals and children. The wolf will lie down with the lamb, the leopard with the young goat, the young lion with the young ones of the herd, and a little child will lead them. But that came from the Jewish prophet, the prophet Isaiah. And no, I didn't say a word about greed and ambition. That wasn't me. That was Jesus. He said, behold the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. King Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one of these. And for good measure, he threw in a left hook and an uppercut. Whatever you do to the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. So are you, as a journalist, suggesting to your audience that they should be offended by Nobel Prize winners and the prophets, or should I just go home and burn my books? I seem to recall that was the strategy favored by Pol Pot. Well, the journalist was speechless and attacked me the next day for being a radical. Cottonians, we need another radical, Copernicus and Galileo, to remind us that we are not the center of the universe. Please remember here in India in particular that zoonotic diseases from animals to humans now threaten a pandemic to rival the Black Death, which wiped out half of Europe. I'm just giving you facts so you understand the agenda. 70% of the people in the West are obese or overweight. The risk of a fatal breast or prostate cancer is massively higher for meat eaters. The risk of a heart attack is actually 50%, the same as tossing a coin. For Indian vegetarians, it's 4%. And now Harvard and Cornell University say that the optimum amount of meat in a healthy human diet is precisely 0. And Medicare in the United States has bankrupted the nation. They will need $8 trillion invested in treasury bills just to pay the interest. And they have precisely 0. Or as I used to say when I was at Cotton's, laddoos. They could shut down every school, university, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Homeland Security, FBI, and CIA, and they still will not have enough money to pay their doctor bills. India is following in fast pursuit. You should know by now that water is the new oil. Nations will soon be going to war for it. Underground aquifers that took millions of years to fill are now running dry. When I was a Boy Scout here, I drilled my first well and struck sweet water at Bandarghatta at 80 feet. Today, we're at 800 feet and we're sucking mud. In China, we're at 3,000 feet and the drill head is still dry. And in Bangalore today, 2 million people are experiencing severe water shortages. Now, you would be outraged if 10 jumbo jets crashed every day with no survivors. Well, the same number of children die out of water-related diseases every day. The mighty Colorado River, the Rio Grande, and the Yellow Rivers now no longer reach the sea. They have been sucked dry by the meat and dairy industry. And it gets worse. In 10 years' time, we will need another 100 Colorado rivers just to feed the increased population. So why do I tell you this? Because it takes 50,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilo of beef. 1,000 liters of water to make 1 liter of milk. Remember, 50,000 liters is the same capacity of your swimming pool for 1 kilo of beef. 1 billion people today are hungry. 20 million people will die this year from malnutrition. Cutting meat by only 10% will feed 100 million people, and eliminating meat will end malnutrition forever. And forest depletion by the meat industry costs 3 times as much as the current global financial crisis every year. And India loses 3% of her forests every single year. And food prices are skyrocketing. In the United States, corn prices have gone up 50% in 5 weeks. It used to cost me for Thai rice for my projects in Asia, $197 a ton. It then went up to $1,015, a 5-fold increase in 5 months. And poor countries sell their grain to the West for hard currency while their own children starve in their arms. And the West feeds it to livestock so we can eat a steak. Am I the only one here who thinks that this is a crime? Every morsel we eat of meat is slapping the tear-stained face of a hungry child. When I look into her eyes, do I remain silent? Dostoevsky asks in The Brothers Karamazov, is the suffering of one child worth all the wealth in the world? And he answers an emphatic no. The earth can produce enough food for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. If everyone ate a Western diet, we would need 3 planet Earths to feed us. We've only got one, and she is dying. And I'm sure you guys know that greenhouse gas emissions from livestock exceeds those of transport. Cars, trains, buses, ships, the lot. Livestock is worse. The melting Siberian permafrost now is a ticking time bomb. When it releases its sequestered gas, all bets are off. The Himalayan ice fields are now correctly called the third pole because they irrigate half the world's population through the Ganges, the Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Yangtze, the Irrawaddy, the Mekong, and the Yellow rivers. And they are melting fast. I had lunch with Muhammad Yunus after he won the Nobel Prize, and I told him that all the good that he had done would vanish when Bangladesh drowns. And we freak out in the West when 1,000 refugees arrive on our shores. Imagine greenhouse gas emissions hitting 500 parts per million or a 3-degree temperature rise. That would create 100 million eco-refugees, and this calamity will reshape the geopolitical landscape forever. We are facing the perfect storm, and that is the world that our Cottonians are going into. If any nation had developed weapons that could wreak such havoc on the planet, we would launch a preemptive military strike and bomb it back into the Bronze Age. But we can't. It is not a rogue state. It is an industry, meat. The good news is we don't have to bomb it. We can just stop buying it. So George Bush was wrong. The axis of evil does not run through Iraq, Iran, or North Korea. It runs through our dining tables. Weapons of mass destruction are our knives and forks. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. This industry will end because we run out of excuses. So can we do it? Of course we can. You know, there are only 13 million Jews in the world, but they play such a vibrant role in international affairs. Just look at their Nobel Prizes. Tibet's population is only 3 million, but who hasn't heard of the plight of the Tibetan? But there are over 600 million vegetarians in the world, and most of them are Indian. And that is bigger than the United States, England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all put together. If they were one nation, they would be bigger than the 27 nations of the European Union. And despite this massive demographic footprint, they are still drowned out by the raucous hunt and shoot and kill and cartels who believe that violence is the answer when it should not even be a question. And farmers are the ones with the most to gain. Farming won't end, it would boom. Only the product line will change. Farmers would make so much money they wouldn't even bother counting it. And governments would love us. New industries would emerge and flourish. Health insurance premiums would plummet. Hospital waiting lists would disappear. Hell, we would be so healthy, we'd have to shoot someone just to start a cemetery. Edmund Burke wrote that for evil to prevail, all it takes is for good people to do nothing. Doing nothing is no longer an option for Cottonians. As Martin Luther King said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it polite? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? When I write to the United Nations, I always tell them the peace map is drawn on a menu. Peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of justice. Animals are not just other species, they are other nations, and we murder them at our peril. Justice must be blind to race, color, religion, and to species. If she is not blind, she will be a weapon of terror. So animal rights right now is the greatest social justice issue since the abolition of slavery. And please remember, the 13th Amendment in the United States abolishing slavery was passed on the very day this school was founded in 1865. It just occurs to me that I was born on the 15th of August, India's Independence Day. It also occurs to me that my father, another Cottonian from Pope House, was born on the 2nd of October, Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. The highest award I've ever received by my own government in Australia, I received on the 26th of January, which happens to be India's Republic Day. I am not here by accident. And as I travel around the world to many countries, I speak to good, decent people from all around the world. And they all genuinely want to change the world, as long as they don't have to change themselves. But life does not work that way. First, we change in our hearts, and then the world follows. True leaders must face their own demons courageously. Sitting on the fence is for cowards and crows. Martin Niemöller, the German priest, philosopher, and U-boat captain, spent 8 years in prison for condemning German intellectuals for being cowards. And he wrote, "When the Nazis came for the communists, I remained silent. When they locked up the Democrats, I remained silent. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I remained silent. I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out." Leaders like you must learn to speak out and act courageously. Is it not better to light a candle than to curse the darkness? All the darkness in the world cannot put out the light of a single candle. I believe another world is possible, and on a quiet night, I can hear her breathing. It will be difficult, believe me, but always remember Gandhi's words. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. The last sentence of Scott Fitzgerald's book, The Great Gatsby, reads, "So we beat on, boats against the tide, drawn back ceaselessly into the past. I ask you, are we to live forever in a sick, smug, and cruel past? Let's not relive history. Let's make history, because that is what leaders do. They make history. That is what Cottonians do. They make history." Like Mr. Nehru said on Independence Eve, you have a tryst with destiny. I'm here to tell you, you have another tryst with destiny. Ahimsa reborn. Cling to it with those wonderful words, nec dextrosum, nec sinistrosum. Please do that. And remember, our animal cousins are like us. They have survived millions of years on this planet, and survived evolution. They've earned the right to share this planet with us in peace, and they have waited long enough. The brutes and the bullies have been Goliath, but David is coming. Maybe he is in this assembly. Maybe he is one of you. And if not you, who? And if not now, when? I wish you all good fortune and thank you. Jai Hind!